Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to be discussing securing corridors, ports, and shipping routes, and I really have interesting experts to discuss this topic with us. Before I introduce them, I'd like to sort of give you an idea of why this topic is very important. Today, 80% of world trade transit by sea. So when shipping sneezes, the whole world or global economy catches a cold. Although this sector is extremely well organized and has been for a long time, it is not without its problems and threats. Current events in different parts of the world demonstrate this. Attacks by the Houthi rebels in the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb have a direct impact on world trade and pose a number of challenges. On the other hand, the misuse of supply chains by criminal groups to organize their illicit trafficking poses further threats to maritime transport. Elsewhere, the storage of hazardous materials, essential for agricultural production or refrigeration, exposes the risk of large-scale explosion, as we saw in the port of Beirut in August 2020. In this context, securing corridors, maritime routes, and ports is becoming a major challenge for the global economy. The lack of security in some of the world's maritime domains is having a direct impact on the disruption of supply chains, as well as increasing the financial costs of all players in the industry. To discuss these various issues that we will be tackling during this third section, I will briefly introduce my panelists, starting from my far right. Mr. Peter Amo-Bidiako is the Director of Port of Takoradi in Ghana and a member of the Governing Board of Ghana Ports and Harbour Authority. He is a member of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport of Australia and Ghana. Next is Ms. Morgane Carré, who has served at the European External Action Services since September 2022. She holds the position of the Maritime Security Policy Officer within the Maritime Security Division. Next is Mr. John Gano, who is the Security Manager of the Port of Guayaquil in Ecuador, having served 26 years in the Marine Corps of the Colombian Navy prior to this role. And next is Ms. Eve Postek, who is the thematic coordinator for the maritime security of the EU project, Enhancing Security Cooperation in and with Asia, ESIWA. He is also a retired Rear Admiral of the French Navy. Finally, we have Mr. Nico Betungen, who is the Senior Manager at the Port of Antwerp, Rouge International. From 2019 to 2023, he was the team leader of the EU project Improving Port Security in West and Central Africa. To begin this session, which would be the subject of corridors and maritime routes, I would start my initial questions and aim it at Ms. Carré, Mr. Postek, and Mr. Amo-Bidiako, and starting with Ms. Carré. The first question then is, which political responses can be provided to address maritime security or maritime insecurity, and more specifically, threats to maritime transport? You have 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ife, and good afternoon to everyone. So let me start very quick because I only have 2 minutes. At the EU level, the first step would be, was to take the issue at the strategic level first, to include maritime security in strategic framing, policy framing documents, and to define it as a priority, because it was not the case initially, I can say. First of all, we had the EU Maritime Security Strategy in 2014. It was updated last year. Then we had the EU Global Strategy that talked about how crucial maritime security was for the EU in 2016. Then the Strategic Compass reiterated this priority in 2022. And we also have regional strategies in which maritime security is very important, especially in the Gulf of Guinea, which I work on very much, and the Indo-Pacific in 2021 that Yves can talk about a little bit more, probably. The second step, obviously, was to start implementing those strategies that they provide guidance on how, why, and with whom the EU should build partnerships and operational cooperation on maritime security, including through EU-funded projects and programs that are implemented by the agencies that are represented today in the audience. As you said, maritime security is by essence an international issue, with most of us depending very much on it for our economies and livelihoods. So it's essential to build partnerships with countries and organizations that share similar views and values. I think it's been said also during the day. It's also essential to support the regional maritime security architectures. I think, for example, in the Gulf of Guinea, the Yaoundé architecture for maritime security, or on the other side, there's the Djibouti Code of Conduct and Amendment security architecture that are the direct beneficials of our policies as EU. In present times, we also need to streamline our efforts. The integrated approach of the EU aims at gathering actions undertaken by the EU institutions, the member states, under a common banner to gain in coherence, efficiency, visibility when we work with partners. And I think that in this case, the coordinated maritime presences is a very good illustration of this approach, but we can talk about it in the questions sessions maybe. In the end, I would say that we really need to discuss with all stakeholders, international organizations, governments, administrations, security agencies, the sea users, organizations, regional entities, industry, of course, and we need to invest in existing fora and dialogues where challenges and responses are discussed directly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that concise and yet very clear response. And now moving from the strategic to the operational levels, I would like to ask Mr. Postek a question, which is, in a few words, can you tell us how a maritime route can be made safe? How does a tool like the Indo-Pacific Regional Information Sharing, IORIS, system contribute to this?
Yes, thank you, Ife. So how can you contribute to the security of maritime routes? Obviously through the presence of naval assets, of ships or shore-based aircraft. And the European Union currently leads 2 naval operations in the Indian Ocean. You have mentioned, Ife, the situation in the Red Sea. It also has been mentioned by Mrs. Cabot in the previous panel. To face this situation, to react, the European Union has launched Operation Aspides in February. The goal is to protect the merchant shipping, merchant vessels against multi-domain attacks, multiple kind of attacks that can happen at sea. Currently, ships from Belgium, from France, from Greece, from Italy, soon from the Netherlands, participate to the operation, which is commanded from Greece and with an operational command in the Red Sea from an Italian ship. So that's the first operation. The second is Operation Atalanta, which has been going on for 16 years now. It focused initially on countering and deterring piracy in the Northwest Indian Ocean. And it also monitors illegal activities. And the operation is commanded from headquarters in Spain. So 2 operations. And in this landscape, what role does IORIS play? You mentioned IORIS. It's a tool which enhances maritime domain awareness, which maritime domain awareness is trying to know what's really going on at sea. So it is part of an EU program, which is called CRIMARIO, for Critical Maritime Routes in the Indian Ocean. The program is run by Expertise France. And it's a good example of the collaborative approach of the EU towards maritime security. Through CRIMARIO, the EU cooperates with partner countries in the Indian Ocean and beyond, in the Pacific, in order to secure the blue economy and also to help ensure a rule-based order at sea. So what CRIMARIO, what IORIS does under this umbrella of CRIMARIO is it's a web-based information sharing platform which provides a situation of the maritime picture, which help the members of the platform to cooperate, collaborate, exchange information, and it's a very versatile tool, which right now has 76 security agencies part of it, representing 40 different states in the Indo-Pacific.
Your response. I liked how, in talking about the strategic level, Ms. Carey, you talked about the importance of collaboration, and you showed us what that collaboration looks like in the operational levels, which is very important. And now I come back to you, Ms. Carey, in asking, what is the impact of the situation in the Red Sea? Because Mr. Postek, you did mention the Red Sea in your response, which is a good way into the discussion, and the Gulf of Aden on international maritime corridors.
Thank you again for a nice question. I think we've talked about it, and again, Ms. Cabot from CMA-CGM mentioned some of the major issues related to the disruption of the Red Sea routes between Asia and Europe mainly. It was seen in recent times with the disruption of the maritime traffic during COVID that you mentioned, and then the Red Sea event with the Ever Given blockade in the Suez Canal 3 years ago. It has caused major trouble for the functioning of the strategic supply chains, and it causes financial and ecological costs that Ms. Cabot mentioned earlier. 2 weeks, 2 additional weeks at sea have enormous consequences on logistics chains, seafarer schedules, private lives as well, and resource consumption, of course. But the destabilizing effect of the crisis is also tangible in choke points, such as Suez, and at the end of the routes, because the Suez Canal lost so much revenue because of the crisis. It's dropped dramatically, but the Mediterranean ports are also suffering from the decrease in the traffic, and the Atlantic and North Sea ports now need to handle the surplus in traffic. It's difficult to assert now what will come next, but if the route is made safe again, or really safe, even though we have this operation ongoing, shipping companies will come back because it's the fastest, it's the safest when it's safe for shipping. And as I was saying before, the disruption of international shipping routes calls for direct action as Operation Aspides and concerted solutions on the long term. The Red Sea crisis has led to the most rapid launch of an EU military operation. Aspides has been launched in 2 months. It has never happened before at the EU level. And there's a need for continued discussions between stakeholders, again, to maintain a common understanding of the situation, the means that are deployed to address it, and the shifting usages of the sea, so that we can adapt our responses. And the outreach to regional actors on the EU side has been a priority from the beginning of the crisis at the end of last year. And I think that the EU's transparency on its actions has been well received by those partners, and will continue this diplomatic outreach to the region. So again, those background work strands in terms of diplomatic outreach, in terms of partnerships, building connections. They paved the way for this continued dialogue and ability to act very quickly in this time of crisis.
Okay. Thank you so much. And somehow I feel that your responses have a way of guiding the next question, because you more or less emphasize the quick response of the EU in response to what's happening in the Red Sea. And that brings me then back to you, Mr. Postek, with my question, which is, from an operational point of view, and bearing in mind that in supply chains, as many other areas, time is money, how can we best anticipate these situations and respond quickly?
Yeah, I see three ways of being more aware of what's going on and anticipating the situations. The first one is to speak with partners, and this is what project EZIWA does. EZIWA stands for Enhancing Security Cooperation in and with Asia. It's carried out both by Expertise France and by its German counterpart GIZ. And what we do is support the dialogue between the EU and partner countries in the Indian Ocean, both at the policy level and at practitioners level. So increased dialogue. Second thing is, of course, to step up the naval presence, because when you have naval assets pre-deployed, then you raise the awareness, you know what's going on in the seas that you're sailing, and you are, of course, more ready to react. This is one of the reasons why the EU was able to react so swiftly in the Red Sea for Operation Aspides, is that we had pre-deployed assets. So in addition to the operations, naval operations, which are already going on, Aspides and Atalanta, the member states of the EU deploy assets for on their own national missions, but they contribute to also the security. France deploys assets. Germany has just sent ships on an 8-month deployment. So did the Italian Navy. The Netherlands are now sailing in these areas. So, and these ships, as Morgan has said, they can not only sail separately, but also coordinate their actions through this concept of coordinated maritime presence in order to take the best advantage of ships sailing in these waters and to multiply the effect by a stronger cooperation. And the last point is probably to increase, have a more frequent and fluid dialogue between security agencies and the shipping industry. There's this concept of naval cooperation and guidance for shipping, which helps the security agency discuss with the shipping industry, providing guidance and also deconflicting with military operations. The exchanges could be more fluid and more frequent, and why not more permanent? And I think that IRIS, this leads me back to IRIS, because it's a great platform for allowing the industry to discuss with the security agencies on a permanent basis, on an easy basis. There's a secure, real-life chat, which can be really useful.
Thank you so much for your responses. Again, concise but quite clear in responding to the question that I've asked. Now, from the EU strategic and operational level to a more regional and national level with a country in West Africa, my question is to you, Mr. Amobidiako, and the question is, does this disruption of routes in the context of what we've heard about the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, due to the insecurity in the Red Sea, had any impact on the operation of the Takoradi port, which is the oldest port in Ghana?
Thank you very much. I think I'll answer these questions in twofold. One is yes, and the other is no. If you look at the commodity portfolio of Takoradi, we handle about 70% of Ghana's national export, which is mainly manganese and bauxite. These manganese and bauxite are exported mainly to mainland China, and they have always used the Cape of Good Hope route. So on the bauxite, nothing has really happened. It is it is rather increasing on a monthly basis. From the other side, or the container side, we are yet to see how it is going to affect them. The reason being that we do not have adequate capacity to handle container vessels as compared to our smaller port, Tema port. Tema handles more of imports and more containers are passed through there. We handle about just 3% of national. It used to be 5%, but it has dropped to just 3% of national container traffic. Basically, due to the fact that we do not have adequate capacity. We used to have just 800 meters of quay width at the depth of 10.2 on high water. And this capacity was competing for container, oil and gas, other bulk cargoes. So the containers traffic was very, very minimal as compared to Tema. But going forward, what we've done is that we have partnered with the Yildirim Group of Turkey, Yilport, and all things being equal, by the close of the year, operation will start. The first phase of 600-meter quay wall has been completed, dredged to -16. The second phase will involve another 900-meter quay wall that will be dredged to -14. So this will position us to be able to attract more container traffic, and that is where we're going to see if the insecurity situation in the Gulf is in the Red Sea is not stopped. Then we are going to really see how it's going to affect that. But on the other side, if you look at the Tema traffic, I think there is a positive increase because once they come through Tema, Ghana to Europe, vessel traffic has increased slightly. But a detailed analysis, you realize that transshipment cargo is increasing on a monthly basis. So in a way, it has brought that positive effect for Tema. But in Takrad, we are just yet to have a feel of that situation.
Okay. Thank you so much for that response. And it actually brings an opportunity for us to, I guess, draw connection with the discussions around the global gateway in terms of infrastructure. Where can this be directed, and how can perhaps the port of Takoradi be better able to be part of this global gateway?
Yeah.
So far, we have looked at the strategic level, the operational level, and at the national level of what's happening, especially in the context of the corridors of maritime routes. And I want to say thank you so much for now to our really amazing respondent. Now we're going to have an opportunity to look or have a closer look at port safety and security, because the assumption is if the corridors are safe, what happens at ports? And this time I have questions for Mr. Vettingen, Mr. Amobediako, and then Mr. Yano, starting with Mr. Vettingen. The first question for you, sir, is you were team leader of the EU project on port security in West Africa or Western Central Africa. Can you tell us in a few words what the main challenges are in the area?
Thank you. Before turning to Africa, I would briefly would like to mention something about the Middle East, about Beirut, because it is often quite easily said that major European ports are very difficult to get together and work together. And I would like to use the opportunity to stress that in the port of Beirut, in very difficult circumstances, that Marseille, Aropa, and Antwerp, we really worked well together. And I would like to thank Expertise France for the opportunity and express, at least on behalf of Antwerp, that we are always open to continue working together with other colleagues from other major European ports. Having said that, the WECAPS project was an EU-funded project implemented by Expertise France for 4 years on safety and security on 10 African ports, which was ended last year, which is continuing by the ENMAR project, also implemented by Expertise France this year. So we are still continuing, although the project was finished. Basically with a double objective. reducing vulnerabilities of ports related to safety and security, and increasing response capabilities. And that was the combination, the winning combination of this project. That is what we tried to do. I know I have to be brief. I only have like 2-3 minutes, so I will not tell and not speak about all the details about all these ports. And I agree with the director of CRE report this morning. All these African ports are very different, with very different challenges. It is not possible, and it would be wrong to talk about security in African ports. I mean, that's not possible. But if I would have to take maybe 3 takeaways from the project of working 4 years, I think governance is really key. And governance, that means for me in safety and security, especially the domestication of best practices and international rules and obligations in daily operations. That means everybody knows in the security field about the ISPS code, but to implement it in the port regulations every day, that's something else. So that's one point. The second one is, for me, the risk of having a dual reality in ports. Having terminal operators following international standards on their concessions, working along group international standards, and we have, luckily, some big European players in Africa. And you have a different reality sometimes, not everywhere, but sometimes when you just cross the gate into the other part, which is a so-called other part of the port, where you have a different reality, where it is no concession sometimes, where you have public spaces and where security and safety rules are not applied in the same way. That's the second challenge for me, this dual reality in ports between private and public spaces. And then thirdly, it was mentioned in the previous panel, I think for the future as well, is cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. We are pushing, of course, for many reasons, that the communication should become more digital, and platforms and exchange of information. But of course, it goes with the vulnerability, which is also increasing. And I think cybersecurity and artificial intelligence will have an important impact on safety and security for our ports in Africa, but also beyond. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. And of course, in bringing in the Beirut example, it was also useful for us to seal the deal around this importance of cooperation and collaboration and partnership in itself. And also highlighting what the key threats are. Cybersecurity is sometimes classed as a future threat, but it's good to hear there's actually something that was reflected in the previous conversation as a threat that is actually here and something we must pay attention to. In the interest of time, I will move back to you, Mr. Amobidiako, and my question to you then is, what are the security challenges of the port of Takoradi, taking into account that the threats in the Red Sea have not necessarily affected it as much?
Thank you. I think the previous speaker mentioned the fact that cybersecurity is not a threat. Once you decide to digitalize your operations to enhance efficiency, you will become vulnerable to cybersecurity. And the ports in Ghana are not exempt from these things. We've been having phishing, ransomware, and others that are affecting us. But notwithstanding that, what we've done is to, in 2020, undergo the rigorous systematic process of being ISO certified, ISO 27001. And this has somehow boosted our resolve to ensure that our data is somehow protected. But you know how cybersecurity is evolving. And one of these things is to ensure that we are able to always train our staff to be abreast with the current challenges of cybersecurity. We have also set a 24/7 cybersecurity center. That is where they are able to handle some of these things. The other thing is the fact that our board and management have been so supportive for us to go in and buy systems that are able to advance how do I put it? They are able to recognize the threats in time so that they are able to deal with it. And these things are very, very expensive. And as cybersecurity threats evolve every time, it means that we need to spend more money to be able to be ahead of these things. The other thing is about training of our staff. The weakest link in all of this, you can have the best of technology, but if the human resource that you need to be able to really implement these things are not well trained, it's a cost-90 work done. So we have had support from ENMA, we have had support from US, the Coast Guard, and internally in Ghana, we have also been having our own trainings to ensure that some of these things are resolved. The second challenge that we have, and that is something that baffles me, is since I became the director of port, it's something that I've been wanting to understand. And if somebody is here who can help me understand. At our anchorage, vessels waiting, you'll be there will be a call to our port state control that a vessel has been attacked and 25 paints have been taken away, marine paints have been taken away from their store. And it is something that I don't understand. First of all, every ship is supposed to be the first point of security for its own vessel at the security. We support with our security patrols. The Navy is there to support the Marine Police. We have National Security. We have NACOB. NACOB is the National Agency for Drug. Or immigration, we do patrols and everything. But then the vessel captain will call in that he's been attacked. I am not a mariner, but Rear Admiral, you are here. I know that in the vessel, where the paints are kept are always kept under lock, heavy guarded locks, and that somebody is always responsible, that the key should be at a specific place that is kept secret, that nobody can just enter. And these doors are heavy. When I went to check some of these doors are very, very heavy. How can somebody just board and take, if you know the sizes of the marine paints, take 25 out of it from the storeroom? You will see no forced entry, and they report. And once they report, it goes international, and it's just logged into the system, and the narrative is the West African coast is not safe. Is it really true? No forced entry, heavy 25 buckets of marine paint stolen. Is it an insider job? And that is done to create a certain narrative about West Africa that, oh, there are corridors, and which has a domino effect on everything. Insurance becomes expensive, freight cost becomes expensive, and in a challenging world that we find ourselves now, economic development becomes very hard, and it affects our people. And these are things that we should look into with the support from what is really going. Is this something that I was just talking to a gentleman outside who was talking about the fact that there's a project called Yaris. I've never heard of it, Yaoundé International something. And that the idea of the European Union is to ensure that it becomes West African based so that we are able to appreciate the challenges that we have. It is not that just somebody just reports and it goes into the system, is logged into the data, and that there's red flags all over there. West Africa is not safe. Is it true? Is the narrative that being said? Because nobody can just walk into the storeroom, heavily guarded, always kept locked, and that he takes 25. It's not possible. And these are, I think, there's something untoward about it, and we need to look at. But what we've done so far is to ensure that going forward, if these things happen, the shipping lines, we've talked to them, they will be fined heavily from them to desist from some of these things. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for, again, a more detailed response. You highlighted the challenge of cyber, which aligns with the response that we had earlier from Mr. Bentogin, and you also highlighted what I would describe as false alert or false alarm, I guess, from this perspective. And perhaps this is where that cooperation and collaboration we've talked about should be emphasized more, because a lot of the times the incidents are reported to agencies outside the region. I think there's one in France, m.gov, and perhaps the cooperation can then be reflected in confirming from the region first before broadcasting. Maybe this is one of the ways of championing this cooperation and collaboration that we've heard so much about. I'm now going to move to you, Mr. Yano, to talk about another challenge. And the question for you, sir, is, as we can see, one issue that directly affects port security today is drug trafficking. Can you tell us about the situation in Guayaquil and the impact of criminal activity on port security?
Yes, Ecuador currently is having a big problem with the security in terms of security because 20 years ago, Ecuador was just a route of the narcotics that came from Colombia. But due to structural factors in Ecuador, now Ecuador is a big center operation of the narco-traffic or the traffic of narcotics. So I would like to do mention to this factor. Is the first one is the currency in Ecuador is the dollar. So it's easier move the illegal money through the economy in a country with when the currency is the dollar. It's different to Colombia or Peru and other countries because it's more difficult to launder the money in the economy, where obviously it's easier in Ecuador. The second problem is Ecuador hasn't extradition treaty with United States or other countries. I remember, I am from Medellin, by the way, so I remember in the 80s, the war against the Pablo Escobar and the big cartels was due to the extradition treaty, because that is the big tool in the fight with the cartels, because in Latin America, the control of the prison is not that effective. So now the government in Colombia and Ecuador and Latin America is working hard trying to take the control in the prison, but it's not easy because many people in the society is involved in the same problem. Ecuador shares a big market with Europe, is the big exporter to banana, cocoa, and fish, you know, so it's a direct route to Europe. So now, the GANs increase your operation and empowerment of the business in Ecuador, and put a lot of pressure in the ports because obviously it's the route. So I would like to mention three big challenges in our security. The first challenge is the personnel, because you know the GANs is knocking the gates in the door daily, because they are trying to introduce drug in the containers or, you know, move the drugs through the port. And many times they offer money to our employees, trying to get collaboration. Sometimes they intimidate to our people. So with the principal challenge protects our people, because if somebody say in Ecuador that you will be killed if you don't collaborate, in Guayaquil, maybe it could be real. So the people feel fear about that. So we need to protect our people. The second problem is even the port should protect the cargo in our facilities. We are not the organization designed to fight that problem. So we need to interact with authorities. If you act directly against the problem, maybe you are going to be killed in the street the next day. So need to be careful in our procedure, in our activities, because the risk is very high. And the third challenge, of course, is don't affect the productivity. Because if you need to check or to do many security checks, obviously the productivity could be affected. So because we should to scan 100% of cargo exportation. We need to put extra checkpoints. We need to put extra seals in the containers. We need to move containers in our yard. We need to do subaquatic inspection. You know, so that is time, that is cost, so affected the productivity. So we are in constant communication with the operation, so looking for the best way to do and protect the port. I think the three principal problems in terms of security, the ports due to the narco-traffic problem.
All right, thank you so much for highlighting the main challenges, and so clearly you talked about the main challenge being about the personnel, either their intimidation or the corruptibility, and how to protect them, especially those that want to do the right thing, and then the complexity of who is responsible of actually doing this job without, you know, the wrong person doing the job and then risking their own lives, and then ensuring that productivity is continued even when trying to ensure that we stop the drugs from getting through. And now I want to come back to you, Mr. Ventugin, and the question then is, I believe that 80% of the 116 tons of cocaine seized last year in the port of Antwerp came from Guayaquil. How do you deal with this phenomenon? How does it affect the operation of the port of Antwerp?
Thank you. Well, personally, I'm not an expert in fighting drugs, but I want to answer your question, of course. It of course affects the reputation of a port, and I think I don't know. Somehow it's a strange situation, because the more you fight drugs and the better you get publicity out of it, your reputation goes down. I mean, if you don't capture any drugs, it's not getting in the news. So but Antwerp is aware of the situation and is working hard. Of course, as John mentioned, this is not a responsibility of the Port Authority on its own. This is big business, this is international business, and this is business to fight by customs, by police forces, by other law enforcement agencies, by terminal operators, private or public, but most of the cases private, and then of course also by a port authority. So yes, it is affecting. Yes, it is having an impact on reputation. But overall, it is not having an impact on the port of Antwerp as such. Maybe on a specific terminal, maybe at the end of the day, you could go as far as revoking the ISPS certification of a terminal if it is persistent. But in general, it is not really affecting the port operations.
So much, and I liked how in your response you brought back this theme, the importance of cooperation, and in this sense inter-agency cooperation and collaboration, because it's not just something that the port authorities can do alone. And this brings us to the final question, and it's directed to Mr. Llano, and it is, we know that organized crime misuses supply chains in order to facilitate their illicit trafficking. How can we tackle trafficking without totally disrupting the supply chain?
Yeah, it's a principal challenge, design strategic to protect the cargo. As I said, we are not the organization to fight against the crime, but obviously we need to protect the cargo. In Contecon designed a special strategy trying to protect the cargo, and until now we are getting good results. And how is that strategic? It's important to mention that in Guayaquil, there are different kind of ports. Public ports like Contecon and other ports, private ports. And we have different controls because obviously the public port has all of the control for the government, for the authorities, but the private ports is not the same situation. So obviously, the gangs or the criminal organization trying to find the best and the easy way to send the drugs. And obviously, if in some ports there are less controls, obviously they are going to use that port. So the principal thing in the fight is circle of trust. When the narcotraffic is present in the society, the money of the narcotraffic can touch many sectors in the society, authorities, government, society, employees of the ports, of course. So you can't try or you can communicate the situation about the problem with many people. You need to a special contact for try to the problem or for send the information. So the principal challenge in that thing is identify who is who in this role. After that, the port produce many data with every movement. So you need to identify that data and produce data in real time and transmit to the authorities, because the authorities should operate the information. You can't, because I said the risk is high, because if the criminals know that you are given information, you are dead in Guayaquil. So you need to be careful and through the automatization, design alerts, alarm, system of control, like for example, in Conteco we had some of system twist lock control. Nobody can move any container through the jar if the movement is not programmed in the system, because some years ago you can do it, and obviously the guns take advantage of that situation. We have scanners. That is an interesting problem, because the government ordered to the ports install a scanner for scan 100% of the exportation cargo, but the private ports they don't have scanner yet. So obviously the gangs know that and take advantage of that situation. So now we have a scanning 100% of our cargo, and transmit with special protocols of communication to the authorities the information when we detect some substandard activity in the port. And after that, the communication with the authorities, with the ports in destiny, because we need to interchange information to do the investigation and to know what happened and take the controls that is necessary.
Well, thank you so much for your response. What I'm picking out of everything you said is that, of course, your port and your government are actively working to combat the threat of drugs trafficking, and then you highlighted the importance of circle of trust, and this can be said for every conversation we've had today. In trying to maintain this cooperation and collaboration, nation states, agencies have to feel that they can trust each other for them to work effectively. I now want to use this opportunity to invite you to ask our audience or our experts, questions. And in doing so, I'd like you to first introduce yourself and where you work, and then your question. Depending on the number of questions we have, we could take a second batch of questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ife, and thank you to your excellent panelists for a great session. Actually, what I have is more of a comment than a question, if that's okay. So I am the gentleman that Peter Amo-Bediako was referring to about Yaris. So my name is Sam Megwa. I'm the strategic director for GOGIN 2. So GOGIN stands for the Gulf of Guinea Interregional Network, which is a project funded by the EU, but implemented by Expertise France. And the goal is to contribute to the improvement of maritime safety and security in the Gulf of Guinea with the goal of enhancing economic development and the blue economy. So GOGIN has been in operation since about 2016, and it gave birth to YARIS. YARIS stands for the Yaoundé Architecture Regional Information System, which is similar to IORIS that the Admiral was talking about earlier. Now, it is a maritime domain awareness system, which means it provides a common platform for Yaoundé architecture partners. Some of you may know about the Yaoundé Code of Conduct and the architecture that supports it. So it provides a platform for the national, regional, and interregional partners to engage in information sharing. Now, the second phase of the project, which I am part of, as Peter Amodioko mentioned, is focused on transferring YARIS to the region so that the region takes full ownership of it and has full control and autonomy of the maritime data, security data, and systems that YARIS provides. At the moment, what we are doing is focusing on political engagement to get the political support and commitment to do so. And we believe that by achieving that, we will hopefully address the type of issues that Peter was referring to, whereby maybe sometimes data is misinterpreted or misunderstood without proper engagement with the region. So again, more to come on that. We've just started the second phase of it. Of course, we'll be engaging with IORIS to see what we can learn from it and see how we can work together to interface with the two systems. So thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the comment and for introducing us to YARIS. Do we have any other question or comment?
Yes, again, I'm Sergio Liete from the European Commission. On the observation that you did about the different security standards and safety standards between the concessions, the terminals that are conceded, and the public areas of the ports, I was wondering how. So we know that Europe has a lot of logistic companies and operators operating these terminals, in particular in Africa. And how do they assess this difficulty of that outside their premises this is so difficult to operate? Perhaps you are not the one that can answer these questions, because you should ask to them. But it just came to my mind that how it happens that there are many European operators working under these conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. We really hope that a second WCAPS project could develop further on that topic, but it is sensitive but difficult. We discussed a lot with the private operators and mentioning the argument, but yes, of course, you have high standards on your terminal, but crossing the gate, just looking at the neighbor, the standard drops. Do you feel safe about that, and what could be offered to the port community as a whole? And is it not possible to bring together means to lift up the security and safety level overall in the ports, and then everybody is in a more comfortable situation? Of course, that's not difficult to understand, and all these private operators they feel that they could be working in a more safer environment if that was the case. But it also goes with responsibilities, and taking up responsibilities for a private operator beyond the square meters of the concession is very difficult. And working together is one thing, but taking responsibilities is another one, and be drawn in a situation where they are partially responsible but not involved. is maybe still a big step in the particular African situation. But I think that that there is progression possible. I think we have to find the good keys to do so. Because otherwise, that's what I mentioned as a main takeaway and a risk for the future, that you have different realities and different levels of safety and security within one port. And I think we all should try to avoid that cleavage.
Thank you so much. Is there any other question before we wrap up? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your engagement. So far, our session has shown the importance of safety and security and more or less contextualizing why we have to think about safety and security in the context of the global gateway. Otherwise, we would end up building infrastructures that make it easier for criminal networks to move their goods and services freely. Thank you so much to our experts and to the audience for engaging.